holding group came in, they rented a few floors, and they also rented the naming rights, officially changing the name from the Sears Tower to the Willis Tower. But like I said, we are very stubborn here in the city of Chicago. We will love the Cubs no matter how many times they lose. Ketchup will always be bad, and that is the Sears Tower. You can't change the name of our king of architecture. It's the Sears Tower. Now, how do you get a building that is that tall, structurally sound, and also offsets the sway of the wind? Well, legend has it that architect Dr. Fazler Khan was out for a smoke one day. When he took a look at his cigarette, he thought, one little cigarette is not very sturdy. I can't stack more cigarettes on top of it. Well, what if I took 9 cigarettes and I bundled them together? Now I can start building. And that is how we get bundled tubes. So the Sears Tower is made up of 9 columns that are bundled together at the bottom, creating a sturdy base. And then those columns can raise up to varying lengths, with the tallest one going up 1,451 feet or 442 meters. It is so tall you can feel it in your neck when you try to look up at the very top. Bundled tubes is the same architectural style that is used in the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Now, this style unfortunately did not offset the sway of the wind entirely in the Sears Tower. That top column can sway up to 18 inches on a very windy day, which is enough to slosh around the water in the toilet bowls. And if that doesn't scare you, maybe this next fact will. There are 2 people who have climbed the Sears Tower in its history. In the 1980s, a young man named Dan Goodwin decided to climb the Sears Tower using suction cups and a homemade Spider-Man suit. We very affectionately call him Spider Dan. In the 1990s, a Frenchman named Alain Robert decided to free solo the Sears Tower. That means he used 0 equipment. He climbed it using just his hands and his feet. But he made it to the very top. And at the very top there are 2 white antennas. They are about 30 stories each, but they do not count towards the total height of the building. They are not considered to be part of the Sears Tower's design. They are there for function only. This is unlike a building that has a spire, such as the One World Trade Center in New York. Spires get to count towards the height since they were part of the design. Now, the One World Trade Center in New York is the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, and it gets that honor thanks to its spire. Its building is actually shorter than that of the Sears Tower. And I promise, we are not bitter at all about this in the city of Chicago. If you want to know what 30 stories looks like, just cross your view across the river back towards Gateway Center 1. This black box modernist building is about 30 stories tall. It's been built over the railroad tracks. You can see the metro lit up below. All of these buildings have been built over the railroad tracks. And in order for them to be constructed, they actually had to agree to pay a leasing fee to the railroads because they own the air above them. We call that air rights. Now, on our right-hand side, back in Art Deco canon, this is the Civic Opera Building, built in 1929. The Civic Opera Building was designed to look like a big, giant throne. And it is sitting down with its face westwards and its back east, with its back to New York. I tend to like to think of it more of its face is out westwards, out towards our bright, beautiful, glorious future, manifest some destiny, if you will. And the future of architecture is called contemporary style. Contemporary buildings can be defined as using a sleek glass facade and being full of cool technology. And on our right-hand side, this is the Bank of America building. This is the newest completed building in the city of Chicago, completed in November 2020. 2020. Some things were going on in our world. I'm sure y'all remember them. So this building was actually outfitted with all of your pandemic needs. Things like antimicrobial glass, walk-through temperature scanners, updated air filtration systems, and there's even a little app you can use to call your elevator down, so that way you don't have to touch any of those buttons there. Now, like I said, this will not be the newest completed building for very long, and that is because directly in front of us, that very tall glass skyscraper, that is the Salesforce Tower, and it is not yet complete, but it is very, very close. It has been built up on land owned by the Kennedy family, right on that prime piece of real estate along the Chicago River. But this would not have been considered to be prime real estate for a lot of our history, and that's because when we were founded, we were just dumping all of our waste into the river, which then would flow into Lake Michigan, where we get our drinking water from. The fastest growing city in the world, we had to start pulling our drinking water in further offshore and further offshore, and the next thing you know, we're pulling our drinking water in from over 3 miles offshore. And that worked okay until a storm came in, blew all that dirty wastewater out. Chicagoans were describing what was coming out of their tap as chowder. By the 1880s, we became known as the cholera capital of the world. Beat New York at something. This is clearly a problem that we needed to solve, and instead of not dumping in the river, we decided that we would just reverse the flow of the Chicago River away from Lake Michigan. We built a complicated series of locks and a channel at the mouth of the river, and we dug a 28-mile canal connecting the Chicago River out to the Illinois River. So now all of our wastewater could just flow down the Mississippi straight to St. Louis. They were not happy about that. They did try to stop it, but basically the federal government said that St. Louis could not prove that this was going to make the Mississippi River any dirtier than it already was, and they rushed the project along. I am not encouraging you to poison your neighbors and your environment at the same time. That was super uncool of us. We finally started to clean up the river. We made dumping illegal. This is thanks in part to the Federal Clean Water Act of 1961. But people were still dumping. So we actually put an orange dye in the water that would start to gather in these areas where people were dumping, so that way we could find out who was doing it and find them. But when this dye hit the water, it turned a bright Kelly green color. And any excuse for a party here in the city of Chicago, that's how we get our tradition of dyeing the river green on St. Patrick's Day. The cleanup of the Chicago River is a continuing project to this day. We recently realized if we wanted to get the public involved, or if we wanted funding, we needed to get the public involved. On our right-hand side, you can see the Riverwalk, and you can see those projectors. All those folks that are hanging out right there, they are waiting to watch Art on the Mart. Those projectors are part of the largest digital art display in the world, and every night at 8:30, you can find out what happened to the unicorn projected all over the building. Now, on the right-hand side of the Riverwalk as well, at the base of these steel columns, you can see all of these floating gardens. Those are called fish hotels. They were designed so that way all of those roots could go down into the river, creating a mini habitat for fish, an area for fish to grow up in, hang out in, hopefully not get eaten in. In the 1970s, there was only 10 species of fish left in the river. But today, thanks to our conservation efforts, there is over 76 species of fish in the Chicago River. You could say that it's going swimmingly. Chicago would like to be the greenest city in the United States, and we would love to be the greenest city in the world. We are trying to start to build infrastructure the way we are designing our skyscrapers, the materials that we are using to be more eco-friendly, more energy efficient. If you've been to Millennium Park, that is the largest green roof in the Western Hemisphere, and by some metrics, in the world. Daniel Bernard, the architect of the World's Fair, very famously believed that beauty has a civilizing effect. It makes us want to be better people, better citizens, better neighbors in general. And after the success of the World's Fair, we asked him to come back and design a plan for the city of Chicago. We call it the 1909 Burnham Plan for the city of Chicago. He wanted us to be the Paris on the prairie. He wanted us to have large boulevards, beautiful public art, beautiful fountains. And after the success of the World's Fair and into the 1909 Burnham Plan, a new philosophy of architecture was sparked, and this is called the City Beautiful Movement. And a lot of the buildings in this area were designed with that in mind. So if you look in front of us a little over to the right, you can see that forest green building with the gold on top. It is on top of the Morton, the steakhouse sign. That is the Carbide and Carbon building built in 1929 by the Burnham brothers, the sons of Daniel Burnham. And a lot of people believe that they must have had alcohol on their mind and that they designed that building to look like a champagne bottle. That is an Art Deco building, a green terracotta facade, and those lines are drawing your eyes up towards the top, towards that gold, which is real 24 karat gold. But it's super, super thin. It's like 1/800th of an inch, or about the width of saran wrap. Over to our right-hand side, behind this white box building, this tan building with the beautiful dome on the top, two domes on the side. That is the Jewelers Building, built in 1927 by a protege of Daniel Burnham within that City Beautiful movement. But like I said earlier, one of our favorite things in the city is beauty and function, and this building was designed to solve a problem. The problem here was that if you worked in the jewelry making business, you were probably going to get robbed trying to go to work or trying to go home. So this building sought to cut that out by building a lift for cars, take you directly to the parking garage. It actually worked fairly well until cars became so wide that they no longer fit inside there anymore. So after the first 14 years of this building's life, we did take it out and turn it into more office space. And that is the Jewelers Building. Now take a look at the London House and the Mather Tower, that rocket-shaped building. Take a notice how these four buildings here are really tight together. There are no alleyways, no spaces in between them. This is a very good example of what Daniel Burnham did not want for the city of Chicago. This is more East Coast architecture style. Daniel Burnham wanted us to have these large alleyways in between our buildings. It's harder for fire to cross, but the real reason is that he wanted us to have a designated hiding spot for our garbage. If you're in a city where the garbage is on the sidewalk and you're walking on it and you're smelling it and a gust of wind comes and smacks you in the face, then you might start to feel like you are garbage. But if you're walking in a beautiful city that smells relatively okay, then you might be less inclined to be a trash person. Now the London House, it does have a rooftop bar. It is very well renowned. It is actually the second highest rated rooftop bar in the United States. Normally we really hate being second, but number one is not in New York, it's out in Washington.